This is the Buckingham 8-inch cast iron pan. So it arrived. Well, the seasoning on it isn't that bad, a bit rough, but overall pretty good. A bit disappointed that the handle isn't as it was in the picture. But what I'm going to do now is take my drill with my attachment and I'm going to smooth it out. So this is what it ended up turning out like after using that drill bit attachment, a wet sanding block and the edge of a sanding stone. Just for comparison, this is what the texture's like on this pan, which is very non-stick when I'm cooking stuff in it. And this is a Benjamin and Edwin 10 and a 10.5 inch, which might be about 40 years old. Anyway, I'll show you how to season it. The way I season things is very simple. I literally just put it on the stove and I use sunflower oil, that's from Lidl, and I use one of these. Just take your silicone brush, put a drop into the pan, spread it out, cover it. You know, this did come with quite a decent seasoning layer, but it just wasn't very smooth, which in my experience kind of affects the way that the pan cooks. So all I've done is taken it down a bit, and then the rest I'll be able to rectify just with the seasoning itself. So, you know, it's on a low flame, and I'll just leave it now for 10-15 minutes until it starts to turn into its coating, and then I'll keep brushing it with this, and eventually it'll look like, this is a waffle iron I bought about 2 years ago. I've only used it 20 or so times, but eventually it ends up being very smooth and non-stick, and this is pretty much exactly the same as this Buckingham cast iron pan. My thoughts are for £15 it's pretty good, but I'm a bit disappointed that the handle in the picture is different to the handle that actually arrives, because otherwise I could have bought one for £10 or so with this same handle, because I did really want it to match this handle, which it did in the picture, but it's not end of the world kind of stuff. Anyway, so that's the Buckingham 8-inch cast iron skillet pan. It's alright. This is basically what starts to happen. You'll get the pan smoking, and then you need to leave the extractor on, and it will start kind of just seasoning just around the edge. And slowly over the next 10-15 minutes, the colour will just go all across. And because I've not really knocked off anything on the edges, because you're not frying on the edges of these pans, you're frying in the centre, maybe it gets to just the edge. So that's the only part that you need to worry about getting smooth. The rest of it, over time, it's going to get mucky, it's going to, let's show you an example. This is what the edge of my pan looks like. This is a great pan, but there's just no point in getting too worried about it, because this stuff will burn on anyway. So as you can see now, it's getting up to temperature. Why I like these silicone kind of spreaders is that you can put them in the hot pan and they're not going to melt. This is great. Granted, it gets a bit smoky, but that's all it is. You're making a coating for the pan. And the oil itself is that coating, so you know, I'll come back in a minute. There you go, about 3 minutes later, and you can see it's already starting to develop a decent seasoning. You know, people say use the oven, people say, oh, only wipe on a smidge of oil. Really, it doesn't matter. You know, these cans are pre-seasoned. You know, granted the seasoning's a bit rough, but when it comes to having a non-stick surface for you to cook on, you know, the more, you know, the oil's going to burn off. It doesn't really matter. You don't need to get all tied up in it. You know, right in the centre, obviously, it kind of shows you as the pan seasons where it's sitting, because where the oil is left, that's what's not seasoned yet. But you'll see that, so you can tell that the hot spot really will be the centre of the pan, and that's where your oil will form, which is good. You know, it's good for the pan. I've just put some oil in to kind of show where, at least on my stove, where the oil is kind of setting. And that's an important part of the pan, because most of the time you cook stuff in the middle of the pan, you're not cooking stuff on the edge. Certainly compared to my older pan, that's been, I think I've re-seasoned it myself now over the last 10 years at least. You know, 3 times doing the same method, just knocking back all of the seasoning and then starting again. You know, probably this is due a go at some point, but it still cooks great. Nothing sticks to it. You know, but you know, there's really nothing to worry about with these pans. For all the extra aggro that people try and make out that it is to season them, it's really not, because once it gets hot like this on a gas flame, you're making the seasoning. It stinks a bit, you know, but it's only this one time, and then every time after, you know, you're just cooking with it, give it a clean. It really doesn't matter how you clean it. You know, I've cleaned it with soap, salt, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't make a difference. As long as at the end you get this with a drop of oil and just wipe wherever it looks a bit matte. You know, that's what I'd say is the most important thing, is that anywhere that looks a bit matte should be just a little bit shiny when you're putting it away, because that will just stop any moisture in the air from rusting the pan and making it unsightly. But if it does get rusty, all you do is you wash it off with some soap and water or some salt and water, so you knock it back to the base seasoning and metal, and then just do exactly what we're doing here. Just put some oil in it and cook with it. You know. Anyway, we'll be back in a minute and we'll see what we get up to. Right, so I wiped it out and I've added some fresh oil and I've turned it off. And I'll just leave that now to smoke down. And I'll probably give it a wipe with some hard bristled brush, put it back on the stove, and then we'll do an egg test in it. Should leave it probably about 20-30 minutes to cool down, but you know, we'll see. Right, so some time has passed. You know, I didn't wait 30 minutes, as my esteemed colleague Sim said, but you know, it really doesn't matter. It's hard and loose. You know, if I was going to do it the professional way, then I'm sure I'd do it differently. But this works anyway. Here's a Peking egg, little tiny one. Let's see if it sticks. You know, any of this discoloration after you've used it a couple of times, it'll just be completely black. But you know, the pan is oiled, only lightly, again with this. You know, with cooking this kind of stuff, pan needs to be hot. You put an egg on a cold cast iron pan, it'll stick. You know, if you want enough oil, it might not, but it needs to be hot. You know. But anyway, so that's been on there for a second. I'm going to get myself some kind of spatula. There we go. Some kind of spatula. And look, it doesn't stick. You know, and this pan, I seasoned it for what? 15 minutes on stove. You know, don't need to believe spending like 4 hours heating up the oven, putting it in, everything. It's complete bollocks really. It's a waste of time. If you just want a pan to use, cast iron pans are very simple. You know, they're not complicated in the slightest. The surface at the base just needs to be smooth. Use whatever you've got to the point where, you know, it's not perfect. It's not like a piece of sanded wood. But, you know, it needs to be smooth enough that things aren't going to, like, stick in the grooves or in the little recesses that apparently are caused by the process of getting all the sand and stuff off at the foundry anyway. But, as I'm not a foundry person, who knows? Look, it's a nice, perfect egg. It's going to taste delicious, beautiful. And that's it. That's all you need to season your cast iron pan. This Buckingham 8-inch one anyway. Anyway, that's it. Have a good one. Just to prove that it's completely safe to eat, I'm going to now eat it. There's no carb and there's nothing, you know, that has sealed. So, very good.